me when I call. You are my morning song. Though darkness fills the night, it cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear? You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield, though trouble lingers still. Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. My strength is in your name, for you alone can save. You will deliver me, yours is the victory. Whom shall I fear? Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hand. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful, you are faithful. Nothing formed against me shall stand. You hold the whole world in your hands. I'm holding on to your promises. You are faithful, you are faithful, you are faithful. I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The God of angel armies is always by my side.
Well, because we all tend to hit where we're aiming. I think it's important that we stop and evaluate, particularly at the beginning of a new year, where we are, where are we going? Last weekend we talked about being on target in our personal life and the value of knowing God, being in relationship with Him and in fellowship with Him, because it's so important that we're on top of our game personally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, on target in our personal life. Well, this weekend we're going to go the next step, and we're going to talk about the next priority that the Bible has established, and that is the priority of our marriage life, being on target in our marriage. Now, I hope this will be a help to those of you who are single or single again, as well as those of you who are married, and as we learn how to live with one another. In fact, when Peter was talking about the idea of marriage, he said to the men, dwell with them according to knowledge. According to knowledge. It's an interesting phrase. What he was saying in that is there's no man that can successfully live with a woman without information. We have to have some knowledge. We have to know how to do it. And so that's the thing I want to challenge us to. In other words, be certain that we are on target in our marriages, that we're doing well in that regard. Now, I do think it is possible to have a happy relationship with your spouse. In fact, when God instituted marriage, He gave it to us as His highest, His happiest, and His holiest hope for a woman and a man. It is the only relationship that He compares His relationship to. He says, just as I have a relationship to my kids, my church, you should have a similar relationship to your spouse. And so the Lord raises the bar in terms of how He looks at our relationships, and so should we. We ought to invest more of our effort, more of our time, more of our energy, not just in finding the right person, but then in becoming the right person, to be sure that our marriages are strong. I do think it's possible to go from the romantic to the rheumatic and be in love and stay connected with one another. I asked Cindy one time, I said, honey, will you love me when I'm old and unattractive? She said, Bill, of course I do. So things change over time, We've been able to stay together now about 30, going on 36 years. And the secret to our relationship, I told Cindy years ago, if you ever leave me, I'm going with you. That's how we made that work. And so I think the bottom line is we all go through struggles. We all go through difficulties. We all have problems in our relationships, but we can make them work. It is possible to have a happy home. It is possible to be in a good marriage. I remember an elderly couple, in fact, they've been married close to 60 years, and she was thinking about their relationship, as women typically do, more so than the men. And she said to her husband, they were watching TV one day, and she says to her husband, she said, honey, you used to sit next to me when we watched television. So he saw where this was going, right? So he gets up and makes his way across the room, and he sits down next to her. And in a little while, she said, honey, you used to put your arm around me when we watched television. So he reaches up and puts his arm around her. And she said, honey, you used to nibble on my ear while we watched television. So he gets up and walks out of the room. She said, honey, where are you going? I didn't mean to offend you. Don't leave. He says, I'm not leaving. I'm going to get my teeth. Well, things change over time, but things can actually get better over time. We can have better relationships. One more. I heard about a couple, they were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and the pastor was interviewing them. They were in the church 50 years. Man, that's awesome. You guys have been married 50 years. He said, yeah, that's true. So the man was there, obviously, and he's talking to him. The pastor's talking to him. He says, well, what's the secret of being married that long? He goes, well, he said, I understood my wife. I know she loves to travel. And so on our 25th anniversary, I took her to Beijing, China. She always wanted to see that part of the world, and I took her to Beijing, China on our 25th wedding anniversary. She said, how wonderful is that? He said, how are you going to spend your 50th anniversary? He said, well, I'm going to go back and get her now. So you can actually make, that was pretty funny. You can actually make those relationships work, but you've got to work on them. It's not automatic. Listen, I have never done a wedding ceremony for a young couple that did not have every intention of their relationship working. I've never seen a couple yet who didn't get engaged to one another, who did not absolutely desire more than anything else for their marriage to go the distance. I've never talked to a young couple who are planning on getting married, and I visit with them a little bit, and I say, well, guys, what are your goals for your relationship? And for one of them to say to me, well, we're going to give it a shot. We probably aren't going to make it, but, we're going to see how long this works. I'm not sure I'm through dating, and I think she still has a couple of guys she wants to go out with, so, well, we're going to go ahead and do the marriage thing and see how that works. No. No, they have every intention of these relationships working out. But as we all know in this room, it is as though when you commit to one another, all hell comes against that type of relationship. The devil begins to work overtime on trying to pull you apart. And it's interesting that the things that attracted us to one another began to annoy us after a period of time. Some of those differences, and we are different. God has a great sense of humor, doesn't he? I mean, men are very different, women are very different. The left brain, right brain, I won't get into all that. But the point is, women tend to be a little more wired to their emotion. Men tend to be a little more analytical in how we approach problem solving. Sometimes women want to process, men want to solve. And so you have this interesting conflict in that relationship, that interesting dynamic anyway. And so because we're so different, we approach everything in that way. And God has this really incredible sense of humor when he put us together. For example, when you were dating and you would go to this restaurant, it was your favorite restaurant, you have a restaurant that's your restaurant, and you would go in there and she would study the menu. And you're thinking, at the time, how cute. She can't make up her mind. In fact, she's gonna go off the reservation. She's probably gonna create a little thing that's not even on the menu, right? And so she asks, I know this is not on the menu, but would you do this for me? And you're thinking, oh, isn't that cute? How she doesn't want what they've actually, created here. She wants to do her own thing. Remember, guys, when you thought that was so sweet? And then all of a sudden you get married, right? And you go back to that same restaurant and you look at her and you go, honey, we've been coming here forever. You've got the menu memorized. Make up your mind. Oh, please don't tell me you're going to pull him over here and create your own. The very thing at one time you thought was kind of cute, now it agitates you and it irritates you. And I'm just saying, if you aren't careful, those little seeds in a relationship can grow into cynicism, and it isn't long until it becomes wedges that begin to gradually push us apart. And every relationship in this room will go through those cycles and go through those series of times when that happens. Now, you have to understand, it is the will of God for our marriages to complement each other. See, there's a lot of misunderstanding about how relationships work. Some people see their mate as defective instead of seeing them as different. They're just, something's wrong with them. Instead of saying, no, they're just very different. God wired them and made them that way. And what happens when you see your mate as defective as opposed to being different, then you see it as your role to change them. And you will see that you're on a mission to try to fix them. And what happens in that type of a marriage is you compete against each other. And it's a marriage of competition, of one-upmanship, of always saying, you need to do this and you need to work on you. And in saying that, you're assuming that you're at a very different level than they are. And so you create this spirit within your home of competition. There's another misnomer when it comes to marriage, and that is the idea that your marriage partner can now complete you. Remember the line from Jerry Maguire, you complete me. What a load. That is the biggest bunch of baloney that I've ever heard of in my life. Now, it's romantic, and you may swoon and oh and ah, but there's no truth to that. Look, if you're not a complete person, there is not a human on this planet who can, quote, complete you. God did not set you up that way. God did not design you in such a way that you need someone else in your life before you are a whole you. Now, stay with me on this. This is really important. In other words, it is not one half person meeting another half person, and together they're now a whole person. It is one whole person meeting another whole person, and together they make an incredible relationship. That's how marriage works. That's what I started last weekend by talking about being on target in your personal life. I mean, you got to work on you. You got to know I'm healthy physically. I mean, Cindy can't eat for me. She cannot exercise for me. There's a lot of things that I have to do for me or I don't benefit from it. I have to be healthy physically. I have to be healthy emotionally. That means the people I choose to hang out with, the people I listen to and receive counsel from, the people that I allow to influence my life. That's why sometimes when you get in a marriage relationship, if you're hanging out with people who don't respect that institution and they don't value your spouse, kick them to the curb. You should not have a relationship with anyone that does not respect the relationship you have with your spouse. I don't care how long you've known them. I don't care how cool they are. There are some people in your life you need to lose from your life if you're going to be healthy emotionally. All they're trying to do is drag you down to their level. They're not trying to help you. They're trying to work against something God's doing that's positive and good in your life. If someone comes into your world and drives a wedge between you and your spouse, you need to kick them to the curb. You need to be healthy physically. You need to be healthy emotionally. Hey, you need to be healthy spiritually. When you are a whole person, when you are a healthy person, you bring so much into that relationship. John Maxwell, probably the greatest teacher on leadership in the country, was a great pastor out at Skyline Wesleyan Church in San Diego for years. He and his wife would travel and do marriage seminars. And John said that his wife would teach one part, he would teach the other part. He said his wife was up one time and he said, we just kind of started doing these things. We're working through the material. And she tells this audience full of young couples, she said, I realized right after we got married, John will never make me happy. And John said, I'm sitting over there going, oh my gosh, I can see, this whole idea is going down in flames. What's he doing to me? I can't. She said, I realized, now stay with her, what she was saying. She said, John can never make me happy. She said, I came to the conclusion that I have to make myself happy. I have to be happy as a person, and he adds to my happiness. And he goes, whew, thank God she cleaned that up. But she's right. No one can, quote, make you happy. You have to be happy in and of yourself. You have to be a whole person in and of yourself. And then when you are that healthy, whole person, then you bring so much more into the relationship. Because I'm telling you, there's no guy or girl out there that has a big enough shovel to dump what they have into you to complete you. It just won't happen. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be unfulfilled. You're going to feel like you've married the wrong guy. It's like the guy that wore his ring finger on his right hand. The guy said, why are you doing? You're wearing it on the right hand, on the wrong hand. He said, I married the wrong girl. Well, look, the point is, the minute you say I do, it's done. I mean, there's something about let's make this thing work that ought to permeate all of our minds. But I'm telling you this morning, one of the fundamental problems that we have is that we have this misunderstanding that because we're different, we think we're defective, and we look at it as either competition or something that should complete us. And that's not how it works. How it works is we should complement one another. We should complement. One of the greatest books, I highly recommend it. Cindy and I know Dr. Willard Harley and his wife. They've written a tremendous book together. It's been out a while called His Needs, Her Needs. Gary Smalley is another great author that talks a lot about marriage. But if you don't have His Needs, Her Needs, you ought to pick it up. In it, he talks about the 5 basic needs of women and the 5 basic needs of men. And the whole premise of his book is most marriages are stressed because we don't understand the way we misunderstand one another. And that's so true because we're very different. We don't often work all that out in the dating years. We don't always work out all those issues. But once we get married, then those issues really pop up to the surface. And so once we understand how we're wired and what our basic needs are, then we understand better how we can meet those needs. Listen, this is interesting. He said the top 5 needs of women surveyed nationwide, here's what they said. Number 1, they need affection. And women defined affection as non-sexual touching. So I'm saying that for the men, ladies. So we understand what that is. We don't always know what that is. So affection, and that just means kindness, being sweet, writing the little notes, sending the flower, doing the unexpected things, affection. Women said that was more the thing they needed from a man more than anything else. You can tag on that romantic, affection. The second need that a woman said that she has is communication. Communication. She wants us to talk and listen. and we communicate not just with our ears, but we communicate with our eyes. Someone has well said that a husband can look at his wife and not see her, and a wife can see through her husband without looking at him. So there's something about communicating with one another. So there's this idea of affection and then the idea of communication. Third thing a woman said they need is honesty. Honesty. Sometimes we men think we're protecting them from the harsh realities of what we're going through by not talking to them. It's the worst thing in the world you could do. Women want you to be honest about where you are and honest about where things are. And so you have this idea of honesty. The fourth thing that women said they need is financial security. Financial security. It doesn't mean you have to be wealthy. It just means she needs a plan. She needs to know we're going to be okay. That ranked number 4 of the top 5 things women said were important. And the 5th thing women said they needed more than anything else from men is family commitment. They need to know you're committed with this thing with the kids, that your head is in the game. You don't punch out when you get home. You don't just zone out in front of the TV. You're actually locked in. You are giving some of your time, quality time, to the house. Now, those are the 5 top needs women said they had. Now, here are the men, ladies. This is what the guys say they need. This is going to shock you to death. Number 1 need of a man is sexual fulfillment. I know that's a shocker, so we'll move off of that. Number 2 is recreational companionship. Men said that they need a woman who enjoys doing the things they like to do: golf, hiking, camping, fishing, recreation. They want you to be a part of what they really enjoy, a recreational companion, to be a part of their world. Third thing men say they need is to have an attractive spouse. That doesn't mean you try to be a beauty queen. It just means you don't try to scare the crows off the corn either. So, should I have said that? Sorry, some things are funnier in your head than when they come out of your mouth. I am so in trouble. My wife is going to kill me for that little funny. But here's the point. It just means you take a little time with yourself, you know. You attract. Men said that's important to them. Well, look there, honey. You actually. Well, I'm going to stop. Shutty. Just shut it down. Okay. Recreational, attractive. Where were we? Okay. Number 4, domestic support. Domestic support. Men say that they love the idea that you, as ladies, value the home. That you keep women. Somebody's well said that women are the heart of the home, and men value that. We may not always communicate that well, but the home functions because of you. But you ever been to a bachelor's apartment or a bachelor pad? It is just like you got to wear a hazmat suit to get around. And so men say that is a valuable thing. And then the 5th thing men say that is important to them is the admiration of their spouse. Just to know that the wife loves and respects them. Great pastor that influenced me a lot early in my ministry is Dr. E.V. Hill out in Southern California. He's in heaven now. He preached the funeral of his wife. They had been married 50 or 60 years. And he talked about early on in their marriage how that he wanted to start a business. And he ventured out. He and his wife agreed to invest their life savings into a gas station. So he bought a little gas station there in Southern California, put everything they had into it. And he said, man, it just wasn't going very well for us. It was tough. Some of you have been there. He said, boy, it was just hard. We were working hard. We just weren't making hardly any money. He said, I came home one day. It's been a very hard week. We'd had a hard month. He said, I walked in and he said, my wife had a beautiful table set. She had candles on the table. And she met me at the door and hugged me and kissed me. And she said, honey, I just thought, given all the stress you've been under recently and all the pressure let's just have a candlelight dinner. Just me and you. I farmed the kids out. It's just going to be us. And I just want us just to enjoy each other. And we're just going to have a nice dinner. And I wanted to do something really sweet for you. He said, wow, I just couldn't believe it. He said, I went into the bathroom to wash my hands before dinner. He hit the light switch and the lights didn't come on. He said, so I went down the hall and I hit that switch and they didn't come on. He said, then it dawned on me, our electricity had been cut off. So I wasn't surprised. I just, He said, I went to my wife. I said, honey, what happened? She said, oh, they cut the power off today. She said, I wasn't going to tell you that till after dinner. I just wanted us to enjoy being together. She said, we had each other before we had any money, and I just wanted to kind of reorient us to that. And with tears streaming down his cheeks at her funeral, he talked about the fact that one of the things he admired most about his wife was how much she admired him. And here's what he said, and it really struck me. He said, in all the years we were married, she never broke my spirit. She never broke my spirit. Sometimes women don't really realize the power that you have over your husbands in that you can build his spirit or break his spirit. And really, unfortunately, and I don't want to get too far off in the deep weeds on this because I need to finish my point this morning. But men, we get a lot of our self-worth from what we do. Now, it shouldn't be that way, but it is that way. Women tend to get a lot of their self-worth from who they are, their children, their family. Men tend to get their self-worth from what they do. So if a man's business is doing good, he feels good about himself. If he's doing okay financially, he feels pretty good. But on the other hand, if that starts going south, he tends to not talk about it because his knee jerk is to protect his wife from that reality. And of course, after understanding her basic needs, she resents that because she doesn't know why he's not being honest with her about it. And so you have that conflict going in. Even though his heart is in the right place, he's trying to protect her from that. But all of a sudden, a man feels in some way he must have failed. He must have failed. And so in that critical moment in a relationship, a woman can break the spirit of a man and really break him down to the point that he doesn't want to try anymore. And what E.V. Hill was saying in tribute to his wife is she never crossed that line with him, that she was a woman who always encouraged him and admired him. Man, when I heard him talk about that, I realized that's the secret of his effectiveness in his life. He became an incredible businessman, one of the most prominent pastors that I've ever met, an incredible influence on men like T.D. Jakes and others. And I'm saying it all goes back to the woman that he was connected with, to his life partner, that person that recognized my job is to complement. His job with her is to complement, not to compete or complete, but to complement. You know that famous verse, in fact, look at Ephesians 5 with me quickly. In Ephesians 5:31, it repeats the original idea in the book of Genesis, where he says, and this is why a man leaves his father and mother and cherishes his wife. No longer are they two, they're now one. Now here's where the conflict comes in. People will say, well, which one? If two become one, then which one? One of us is going to emerge here as the dominant one. Well, who is it? If it's two becoming one, which one? Well, it's neither. It doesn't mean one partner in the relationship becomes the dominant partner so you lose your identity in him, or he loses his identity in you. It's not back again to trying to domineer that other person. That's not what he's saying. He's saying you're now a composite of one another. You brought your uniqueness, you've brought your qualities and strengths and weaknesses into a relationship where he has his uniqueness and his qualities and his strengths and his differences and his weaknesses. And together, you two have created something that didn't exist until that union happened. That's the idea of two becoming one. He's saying you bring two whole people into this relationship, and then in that, it becomes a whole relationship. Now, he colors it a little bit when you read the entire chapter, and for time's sake, I'll just touch on three important qualities that have to be in the relationship before this can happen. And hopefully, we'll see how this works. But the first thing that has to be in it is what I'll call the consent factor. Before two can become one, we have to have agreement. We have to consent. We have to agree to some things. And he uses an interesting word that just sends shivers down everybody's spine. It's that word submit. He talks about submitting, notice it now, to one another. And then he speaks specifically to women, and he talks about how this is the role Christ has with his church. It doesn't mean one person is less than the other person. It means one person yields to the fact that someone is going to give an account, and when God says, I call a home into account, I'm going to ask Dad about his home. When God calls a marriage into account, he's going to ask the husband about the home. Now, this is from God's point of view. That's how Paul's writing. He's saying from God's point of view, he's going to hold the men responsible. That's why, let me give you a theory. That's why I believe it is so difficult for men oftentimes to connect with God than it is for women. I mean, in the average church, I promise you, the pastor, you talk to any pastor, any denomination you want, and he will tell you that it is easier to get women to recognize the spiritual value of connecting and getting in church. It's easier to get the women to see that value than it is the men. And I'm talking about our species, boys, so hang with me on this one. I think it's because the enemy knows what we bring to the table. When we started the church, statistics on church growth said if you reach the kids, you'll get the family. That's 15 years ago. And that's still a big part of it. Most of you will make a decision on where you go to church based on children's ministry, student ministry, or if your kids like what we do in the big room. So you make a decision there. But did you know that dynamic over the last 15 years has changed? Did you know church growth statisticians and people who watch this sort of thing say now that more than 70% of the families that connect into the life of the church do so because dad bought in. Dad bought in. And they say if dad doesn't buy in, then your chances of really ever getting that family plugged into the church shrink enormously. And so I'm saying if I know that and you know that and statisticians know that, certainly the devil knows that. So he goes overtime trying to keep men from seeing the value of their spiritual life. I mean, thank God women recognize that, right? I joke about Cindy being the spiritual one in my house, but that's true about 90% of the time. I mean, there's something about the heart of a woman that's easier to connect with God. And we men sometimes, I don't know why, but we resist that a little more. And I'm saying that one of the things we have to recognize as men is we are going to give an account of God for our marriages and for our homes. You say that's not fair. Well, maybe it's not fair. You have to take that up with God. I don't write it. I just deliver it, you know? But that's how he says it. That's how he set it up. That's his order. And he starts out talking about this concept of two becoming one by seeing the value of us consenting to that order. We have to agree to that. And we naturally resist this idea of submitting to one another because, remember, we both want to dominate that relationship. We both want to be in control. One of the best ways that helped me understand this was Cindy's great-grandmother who's been in heaven. She lived nearly to be 100 years old. She and her husband Ernest had such a great relationship, they just called her Mama Ernie. She and Ernest, they said that I never got to see this, but they said even when they were up in their 80s, Ernest would still drive his little guy and he'd be behind the wheel. They said if you were following him, it looked like two little kids in the car. You see these two little heads. You pull alongside of them, you look, there's these 80-year-old people, she's sitting right in the middle of that car right next to Ernest. I mean, they had that kind of relationship. And so when Ernest passed away, that's when I kind of came into the family. And she told me on one occasion, we were talking about marriage. And I said, wow, it just blows me away, Mama Ernie, how y'all made your marriage work. She goes, you know what I determined? I said, what's that? She's a little old Nazarene lady. She said, I determined years ago, I understood it. I didn't totally agree with the fact that Ernest was going to be the head of our house. But she said, I figured God had a reason for setting it up that way. So I agreed with that. And I didn't have a problem with it. But here's what I determined. He might be the head of this house, but I'm the neck, and he don't turn without me. That's pretty good theology. That's actually right. Notice one another. It's mutual submission. Sometimes we focus on the wife's point, and we forget that before he starts there, he starts above that by saying it's mutual submission. We submit one to another. What does that word mean? It means one equal voluntarily placing themselves under another equal so that God thereby might be glorified. That's it. You know what submission is? It's a four-way stop sign. I don't know how you roll, but when I pull up the four-way stop sign, this is how my mind works. Do you start seeing order? Do you see order when you pull it up? Do you pull up the four-way stop sign and go, okay, I'm second. He was first. She's fourth. He's third. Now, what freaks you out? What freaks you out? It's when somebody goes out of order, doesn't it? You want to get out of your car and say, you disrespectful dude. You were three. You went in the one slot. That was her deal. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would be a horrible cop. I'd be out there pulling people over for ridiculous things like that. But it's order. And you know what offends you? Is they didn't submit to you. You had the responsibility. You had the right. You were supposed to go next. They didn't respect that, and they did not honor that, and so you feel personally violated. Isn't that silly? But it's true. What is he saying in a relationship? We don't want to yield to one another. Most couples have trouble with conflict resolution, and it goes back to who's going to cede their point. And here's how most conflict resolution happens this way in business, is you start with a thesis. You look at the antithesis, and from it you get a synthesis. You start with this point of view that might be completely opposite of that point of view, and from those points of view, you try to find some common ground. And in a relationship, if you're not careful, you no longer attack the problem, you start attacking the person. And when you attack the person instead of the problem, the devil gets you completely sidelined, and this never happens in your relationship. You don't yield. I'm not giving in to that jerk. I'm not giving in to her. I always give in. We always go where she wants to go. And it isn't long until little things become big things, and this factor is not in the relationship, so two don't become one. Let me hurry. Here's the second one. Not just the consent factor, but there also has to be the commitment factor. Notice what he said, go all out in your love for your wives, even as Christ did for the church, totally committed, a love marked by giving, not by getting. Commitment. Can I tell you this morning, love will not keep you together. Captain and Tennille, it doesn't matter, it will not keep you together. Now love's a great thing. It drew you together, and it's wonderful when it can be. But let me tell you, your love for your spouse will go in and out of that relationship. It will get stronger at times and weaker at times. I've talked to couples who've sat in my office and said, Bill, I don't think I love them anymore. But because of the kids and our commitment to each other, we're going to try to work through this. And I've seen couples rekindle their relationship and have something better and stronger than they had even when they first met. So I'm saying it's possible to rekindle, to regain that which is almost gone. So it isn't love that holds you together, it's your commitment to each other. And believe me, I know couples, you would not have thought, you wouldn't think the Justice of Peace married them, you would have thought the Secretary of War married them. I mean, they were not getting along. But if you will stay committed to the process, and by the way, one person cannot make it work. One person can't make it work. I don't care how spiritual you are, how much you pray. I don't care how much you are committed to the. If the other person doesn't make it, if they're not equally committed to it, it won't work. It takes two people equally committed in a relationship to make it work. It's a pretty flat pancake that doesn't have two sides. So I'm just saying this morning that it's going to take two people committed into the relationship, not just for the consent factor, but for the commitment factor. Here's the third one. It involves the complement factor, meaning that we bring the best out of each other. Your relationship ought to be something that brings the best out of your spouse. Notice he says, Christ's love makes the church whole. He brings the beauty out of her. His words evoke her beauty. You know, your words can build someone up or break them down. The Bible talks about the power of your word. Somebody says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Baloney, blognos. Words do hurt you. There are people in this room that can remember words spoken to them when they were in elementary school. Don't tell me words don't hurt. Absolutely they hurt. The Bible talks about the power of the tongue. It can bring war. It can bring about peace. The power of the tongue has incredible control over the life of another person. You can bring out the good in someone, or you can accentuate the bad in someone through the words that we say. That's why I would challenge you in three quick things. I would challenge you to affirm your spouse. Affirm them. Every now and then just say, you know what, you do this so well. I don't know if I ever told you that, but you do that well. And you may have to think of what they do well, but you'll come up with it. What is it they do? You do that well. You know that when you opened that door for me, that was so sweet. You know when you connect with the kids and I see you sitting on the floor playing with them, that's awesome. Not every dad does what you do. You know what you're affirming him. You're affirming her. Not only affirmation, but it also involves appreciation, where you just say thank you. Man, we've forgotten how to be kind. Someone said home is where you go when you're tired of being nice to people. Isn't that a shame? I mean, we're nicer to rank strangers sometimes than we are the people at our home. Sometimes, I know, you unplug and you go in and you just sit down, gone, I'm done. I hate people, I hate the world, I barely love you, and I think I still love God. Now, we don't say that, but that's how we can communicate with our body language when we've had a very bad day. And honestly, so check that a little bit and say, am I bringing out the best? Am I appreciating? You know what you do when you appreciate someone? You add to their value. They say when a car drives off the lot, it begins to depreciate, right? But when you appreciate, it's just the exact opposite. Depreciate is to take away value. Appreciate is to add to value. Here's the last one, adoration. Affirmation, appreciation, adoration. You just say, man, I love you. You stole my heart years ago, and I love you. I don't say that enough, but I need to do better. And I just want you to know I love you. You might be stunned at what that would do in your relationship just to do that. First of all, she'd be shocked. It's like the guy that showed up on the front porch. He had a bunch of roses in one hand and a box of chocolates in the other hand. He was going to surprise his wife. He rang the doorbell. She opens the door, and he starts singing, "When a Man Loves a Woman." And she starts crying. He goes, well, baby, what are you crying about? I just want to surprise you. She goes, no, it's been a terrible day. She said, the washing machine spit water everywhere and the kids have been horrible. And she said, now to make matters worse, you come home drunk. So you might shock her. So go easy on that. That's ending on a high note. Let's pray. Father, help us to have those kinds of relationships. I pray you'll bless every marriage in the room. Bless every single person in the room. I pray, Father, you'll strengthen our relationships with one another. And if there's anyone here today who've never trusted you, I pray you'll give them the courage this morning, this moment, to say, Jesus, I need that. I need you in my life. May that be their prayer. Father, we thank you. We praise you. We're grateful to you. Without you, we have no hope. Without you, Lord, there is nothing to celebrate. So, Father, we give you all praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.